Okay, let's do this again. I spent like 4 or 5 minutes talking, and then a phone call came in and erased my whole video. Well, it didn't erase it, but it interrupted it, so I have to redo it all over again. So maybe I wasn't doing a good job. Anyway, as you can see, today's subject is about, let's talk about it. And it's covering the issue of foundation and plumbing and big ticket items. I know I've kind of touched on those before, but I wanted to give some really good examples today because of what I've been navigating through these last few weeks. When it comes to foundations and plumbing, here in Corpus Christi, we have very expansive soil. Okay, so if you don't maintain the moisture levels around the foundation, sweaty, around the foundation, when it rains, it can cause that soil to kind of explode in a sense, okay, and putting tension on the foundation, okay, because it's going from being really tight and compact, and then when the water hits it, it swells quickly. Okay, so when it swells, it can create pressure on that foundation. And anyway, so the reason they always say have an 18, an irrigation system about 18 inches away from your foundation to just keep that soil around your foundation somewhat moist, so there's not a big change in moisture levels when the rain hits, and so that the soil doesn't shrink up so much around it when it's dry, creating the foundation to move more than it should. Okay, sometimes, oftentimes foundation issues go hand in hand with plumbing issues, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you have foundation issues and you don't have plumbing issues. But if you have plumbing issues, those plumbing issues can create the foundation issues, okay, and vice versa. So imagine if the soil around your house is moving a lot because the moisture levels are not maintained, and that soil is expanding and contracting, and that foundation's moving more than it should. That could certainly cause plumbing to get loose, okay, and leak. On the other hand, if you have plumbing that's leaking, what that does is it expands and contracts, expands the soil underneath your house, right? Moves your foundation underneath your house. And at that point, when that soil moves underneath your house, it can put pressure on your foundation and create foundation issues there. Okay, so recently, I had a deal, and the doors were sticking. There was a plumbing leak. And then when we had the foundation guy go out, there was a 2-inch drop in the back of the house from the middle towards the back of the house. So then when we got the plumbing report, the plumbing leaks were in the back of the house. So everything lined up to say that yes, the leaks caused the soil to move, which created the house to start dropping in the back of the house, right? That foundation to drop because that water was causing it to move and drop. Okay, so we asked the seller, hey, we want this plumbing fixed, and we would like the foundation stabilized. Now, understand this, there are different types of foundation companies. Some of the companies say, we'll level your foundation, okay? The company I trust the most explained the journey that they were on from 20 some years ago when they started out in the foundation business, when they were leveling with the other companies they had worked for. And they explained to me, when you level a foundation, you're actually creating additional stress on the interior of the home. Okay, here's, let's say it falls out like this, right? And what the stabilization, the company I prefer to use, sticks their hands under the parts that are leaning. Okay, they don't jack it up. They might lift it a hair just to kind of, if it's really dramatic, but they don't try to level it ever. It's like putting hands under there and holding it in place, because you don't want to move it. You want to minimally move it. Okay, you just want to stabilize it. What was explained to me was that when they try to level it, you do this, right? You bring it up, and then what happens is there's a pressure that comes with lifting it and leveling it, which then sinks the middle several years down the line, and you're looking at another 10 grand plus to stabilize the middle after it sank. So now the one I trust says, we're going to hold it in place, we're not going to level it, and we're going to stabilize it so it's not moving up and down so much, okay? And that way we don't sink the middle and you have to spend another 7, 10, 15 grand down the road. Okay, so what's been happening lately is sellers are saying, well, I'm going to hire an engineer for $450 or $250 and see what they say. Well, engineers are brilliant, obviously. I mean, God knows my brain doesn't get what engineers do. But what I've noticed in these engineering reports is they walk around, they visually inspect the property, they look for cracks, they open and close doors, they look at the soil levels, they draw, they make a drawing of the house, and then they say, doors are opening and closing, or maybe whatever, some are sticking a little, but everything's okay and it's functioning as intended, right? And they're like, it's fine. But they didn't take elevations. They didn't evaluate before and after. In my deal, I sent over the plumbing report. I sent over the foundation report. I sent over the home inspection report showing the engineer, like, are you still okay with your findings? Because the engineer didn't know about the plumbing leak and that it sank 2 inches. And he never replied. And the agent replied to me saying, well, the engineer hasn't changed his mind on his report. He's saying it's stable and functioning as intended. So I explain this to my clients, and my client says, look, it's only in the back of the house. I'll install an irrigation system. We'll keep it stable. As long as I have the engineer report and he says it's okay, we're fine. Okay. I'm a little nervous, but I agree. When it's this kind of isolated area and you can maintain, that area more readily, right? With an irrigation system, keep the drainage good and put in an irrigation system, you can keep that stable, right? So they were okay moving ahead. Well, now I have another deal where the seller didn't want to let us do a hydrostatic test. And something that the plumbers here explained to me was some of the hydrostatic tests done around, not necessarily here, but hydrostatic pressure tests. We are not doing a hydrostatic pressure test where they pump in pressure. Okay, what we're doing is we're putting a little balloon in the clean out, okay, on the outside, and we're pouring water into those pipes, like pouring water into a cup. Okay, we're not pushing pressure on it. Okay, so it's like filling a glass of water. And if that glass or that cup has a hole in it, that water level will drop. We're not pushing pressure in there to see if we can push water out through a crack. That's not what's happening. You're filling the lines like you're filling a cup, and you're going to see if there's a crack in it or a leak in it because it will start dropping. Okay, so I was told that the seller didn't want to put any pressure on the lines, and they already had a test 3 months ago. And I said, well, in 3 months something can change. We'd have to do a hydrostatic test. And I said, there's no pressure on the lines. How come the seller doesn't know that? And they replied, well, we have forms saying that they're allowing a hydrostatic pressure test. I said, I understand that, but your very plumber that you used explained to me that we are not putting pressure on those pipes, and we need to inform the seller that there's not pressure on those pipes. So it made me leery and skeptical as to the honesty of the seller, or the fact that maybe they weren't informed well. I don't know. I'm not trying to accuse anybody, but I'm like, if your pipes are good, it's not going to bother you to fill the cup again because there's no crack, right? So why won't you let us fill the cup? Then I was going to send a camera through because we're not allowed to do the pressure test. Because if it's cast iron still, I've heard of it where people had a hydrostatic test pass and there weren't any leaks, and within the year, the cast iron started to deteriorate more and more, and they faced a $20,000 reroute, and the test passed. But here in Corpus, if your house is old and you have cast iron and you've got this expansive soil and you've got that cast iron deteriorating and crumbling, it's going to have trees growing in it. It's going to leak. Leaking's normal for cast iron, by the way, but it's going to be a big problem in the future. So you don't want to say, hey, Mr. Seller, no big deal, it's not leaking. Hey, nobody's going to care it's cast iron. You're going to need to tell them, hey, you might have to do a reroute if this is cast iron. No one's going to take this, right? So I'm being told, hey, take it. We had a test that passed. So I was willing to do that, but then, and they gave me the engineer report. Well, the engineer report was very vague, and when I did my homework on the engineer, I just wasn't too confident in the scope of the report. and did some research. I won't use any names, but do your homework, and stick with your piece. Never badmouth anyone. You just got to stick with what you're sticking with. I would never say anything about anyone. But it was just not comfortable. But I was willing to go with the report of the engineer if the foundation findings were like one side or one corner, or basically something that my client could go in and stabilize fairly simply, kind of like that other one I did. Okay, it's right here, it's isolated, we got those leaks fixed. Well, just keep your sprinkler system, and it's up to you now to take care of that foundation. We were willing to move ahead if the elevations and the findings from the reputable foundation company were, somewhat manageable. Well, I got the foundation findings, the elevations and the findings from 2012, and then this year, today, and a couple months ago. And since 2012, this foundation has changed dramatically, moved dramatically, and it's even since 2012 to today, and it's falling out, right? It's falling outward, and the engineer says, oh, it's functioning as intended. And then another person was called and walked around with a level and saying, yeah, it's fine. Like, I don't know about you, like if you're comfortable with that, that's okay. But to me, that seems like I go to the doctor, right? And I have the doctor say, I tell him, man, I really have a bad stomach ache. I've had a bad stomach ache for months. I don't know what's going on. I feel sick. And they go, oh, and they touch my belly and they touch my glands and they put their hand on my forehead and they look at my hands and they look at my mouth and they go, you're okay, you just have a stomach ache. And I'm like, yeah, but it's been like several months. And like, oh, you're okay, you're fine. You don't have anything. You're okay. I checked everything, cool. And so the problem continues. In this case, the foundation, plumbing issues happen. Cracks are happening all over the house. There's more cracks and the doors aren't fitting again. They're sticking again. And, there's something wrong. Okay. And the doctor's like, no, you're fine. You're okay. I don't see anything. Cracks are normal, nausea's normal. Like, not really. So the way I see it is finally you get a doctor who says, okay, we're going to do a CAT scan and we'll run a scope down into your stomach, and you find out you have bleeding ulcers. Okay, that needs to be dealt with. At least in my opinion, that has to be dealt with. So my encouragement to you today is not to attack anyone or criticize anyone, or the agent was saying, well, you're implying that we're dishonest or you're accusing the seller. And I said, I'm not accusing the seller. I'm putting together the facts and they don't look good. I'm just, look at all this information. It looks shady. And if it's not shady, show me where it's not shady so I can be the first to apologize. I certainly have no intention to accuse anyone of anything, but I said, put all this together and it looks like somebody's hiding something. And I don't know anyone in their right mind that would move ahead with cast iron pipe. I don't know why the seller, if the pipes are okay, why he thinks they're going to leak and it's going to create a problem if you tell them that there's not pressure put on there. Have them call the plumber and ask him, are you applying pressure, pounds of pressure? And the plumber will say, no, we're filling it like a glass of water and we're going to see if it drops. That's it. So I don't feel comfortable. I relay the information to my client. I ask them if they feel comfortable, and they don't really feel comfortable. And in light of thinking they have cast iron, and they're facing a $25,000 reroute, no, they're not comfortable. And when you're looking at your house falling outward, right, needing support around the perimeter, and we're being told, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's stable, it's functioning as intended. That doesn't look like it's functioning as intended. It keeps moving. And pretty soon I'm gonna have popping tiles and more cracks and whatever, and the doors aren't gonna fit. So anyway, I give this to you because I've seen it where a few times where sellers will say, oh, well, we have a plumbing report, we have a foundation report, we have a roof, and when you look into it more and you don't do your due diligence, you might be inheriting a big problem. I knew another person that bought a beautifully remodeled house, and soon thereafter they faced a $30,000 reroute because they bought it from someone who remodeled it and said it was all freshly remodeled, everything was new, and this person said, okay, great, you know, everything's new. I don't need to worry about inspections. It's cool. So lo and behold, they're stuck with a huge